All right, our speaker today is, this is her first time that she's actually been a speaker here at Adam. And I met her at the Whole Life Festival, and she had a beautiful display on all of her mushroom tinctures and teas and all kinds of things. And just my heart said, we need to have her as a speaker. So since I ask new speakers to send me their bio, I'm going to read it because it's very important, and she's got a beautiful bio here. So Gabi is a priestess and a mushroom medicine woman based in Palmer, Alaska. She and her husband Dennis are dedicated stewards and foragers of sacred fungi, both through their public-facing herbal and fungal apothecary, Chai Medicinals, and the non-dogmatic, non-denominational, nature-based University Ministry of Transcendence, which they minister together. Gabi has been growing and consuming mushrooms in ceremony for almost 20 years and dedicates her life to holding space for others on their own personal journeys to self-trust through a return to nature. Gabi's sacred fungal education is a blend of travel, study, and hands-on ethno-botanical training and sacred ceremony in ecstatic states. Gabi's journey has taken her through the Americas to find connections with human, shamanic teachers, the plants and fungi themselves as master guides. Gabi has a BA from the University of Vermont in Spanish and Latin American Studies. She is passionate about the ceremonial consumption of sacred fungi in tribute to the habitats they hail from. Song, sound, and rhythm drive the space she holds for mushrooms and ministry. So we're in for a real treat today, so please help me welcome Gabi Chai Bird.
My own little camera set up for those who can't be here in person, so excuse me while I attempt to do this. Cool.
Am I in frame, Gabi?
Yes, Bobby, you are. Good to go. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes. When I first moved back to Alaska, I came up down from Palmer to a cacao ceremony in this very room and met people that have made a huge impact on our lives in the past 3 years that we've been here. So I'm so grateful for the Ancient Teachings of Masters Center. This place has been around since the 70s, and it's just an honor to be here. Thank you, Dawn, and thank you to the community for having me today. My name is Gabi Chai Bird. I am a priestess. My husband and I run the Universal Ministry of Transcendence, as well as Chai Medicinals. I also have a hard time saying it. Chai Medicinals Apothecary in Palmer. So in the apothecary, we are able to provide many sacred herbs and fungi that are federally legal. Chaga, turkey tail, we do a lot of foraging here locally. Actually, before moving back to Alaska, I used to live in Dutch Harbor, but returned to the lower 48 for a couple of years, met my husband, and ended up bringing him and my stepson to Palmer, and I was really influenced at that time by the mushrooms that grow here in the boreal birch forest. So Amanita muscaria, which is the mushroom we're going to commune with today in ceremony, was a huge part of that. And I actually began working with Amanita long before I ever began consuming Amanita. I felt the spirit of the Amanita move me into different parts of my life. Some people might think that's like crazy talk, and that's fine, but I know in my heart that everything here on this planet is frequency, and I felt the frequency of that mushroom pushing me in certain directions, and I felt that call and that ordinance to come here and be a part of the birch forest in this cold tundra with all of its medicines. We work not only with Amanita muscaria in the ministry, but also psilocybin containing mushrooms. Has anyone here consumed psilocybin or Amanita? Yes, oh, a lot of people. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I know that some of you have been in ceremony with me, either one-on-one or in group. We work with, it's actually possible for us to provide Amanita to the community here through the public-facing part of our shop, because it is not scheduled. Mama Amanita is very powerful. She cannot be cultivated in a lab. She's mycorrhizal. Amanita grows in symbiosis with the birch forest. So the birch trees, the decomposing matter, the other fungi that grow in the forest, the chaga, it all is this like magical divine blend that gives rise to each other, and it really all starts with the birch. The spirit of the birch tree is a very pioneering spirit. Just like a lot of us here in Alaska, we are unafraid to, go into the unknown and go into those places where maybe things feel barren to the mainstream or the majority. So birch is a lot like that because it can actually grow, and it does after the glacial melt, when the soils are very rocky and unsustainable for other life, the birch is able to populate and take root, and because of that, many other species are able to come in later, like the poplar or the mushrooms. So I really respect that about the birch, and I know that people who live around birch, who bring birch wood into their homes, they actually suffer from less chronic illness and from less chronic pain. The Siberians know this, like many of the old traditions of the North know this about birch. Birch has a pain management qualities. If you may or may not have heard that birch has like an aspirin-like quality to it. It's very purifying and very cleansing. So not only with birch, but Amanita grows with the pine trees. And it's a very auspicious time of year to consume Amanita because the shamanic story of Santa Claus in the Flying Reindeer is actually based in Amanita shamanism. The red and the white, we have Santa here representing. And another name for Amanita muscaria is fly agaric, and the reindeer are a part of this too, as the Nordic shamans would have the reindeer consume the mushrooms and then urinate, and then they would drink the urine of the processed urine of the reindeer and have these magical flying experiences. Now, I have not consumed my urine with Amanita. Some people do. They're hardcore or whatever it is, but I get just enough out of it so far from just consuming the mushroom.
That's where the phrase, I'm pissed.
Oh, is it really? Well, so if you're interested in consuming your, and maybe some of you have, because this is shamanic practice that, has not just with Amanita culture, but with many cultures. I know the shamans that I lived with in South America, I didn't know this discussion was going to take this kind of a turn, but they were into consuming their urine. So anyway, there's a lot of different practices out there, but you can actually consume Amanita on its own. You can consume it in its fresh state, but that is very risky. When you hear about poisonings, now there's no known recorded deaths of adult humans from consuming Amanita muscaria. However, there are recorded deaths of people who thought it was Amanita muscaria and consumed one of the other mushrooms in that same family, because some of the most toxic mushrooms in the world are in the Amanita family. So you do need to be 110% sure that the mushrooms that you're foraging in the forest are the ones that you are in fact going for. If you have any question in your mind, you absolutely should not consume a mushroom from the forest. So that is like basic 101 foraging. Know what it is. And you can take samples, you can take pictures, taking pictures of the gills, the top, the environment that it's in, that's very telling. There's a lot of like groups on Facebook and Instagram. There's a great Alaskan mushroom group on Facebook where you can post pictures to have like local experts help identify mushrooms, but you always want to be 100% sure. And you'd be surprised, you'd think, oh, it's red and white, and no one would get confused. Well, people have actually brought me very poisonous species of amanita and thought that might be muscaria. So yes, it is important to be really careful with that. So back to the preparation of amanita. Although you can consume the fresh mushroom, actually what I do when I'm foraging here, and the season's quite short here, but it can be very prolific. This year was quite a good year, but actually 2 summers ago in August, I have never seen so much amanita in my life. I'm talking dinner plates, like everywhere in the forest. And then the next year it was like pretty barren. So it comes in waves and cycles, and I don't claim to fully understand it. I definitely don't know everything about mushrooms. I don't think anyone could. They are the most ancient of the kingdoms. Mushrooms, spores can go through the most hot and most cold of temperatures and survive. There are mushroom spores in Fairbanks that, because the permafrost is melting, there are species of mushrooms that we haven't seen in millennia that are starting to pop up that have survived even the permafrost. So mushrooms gave rise to dirt. It's a very, very ancient teacher and guide. Mushrooms are extremely healing and medicinal for so many things, and we have several books at the apothecary that people might be interested in if they're wanting to work with mushrooms, like as a fungal pharmacy. Actually, one of the books that I work with a lot is called The Fungal Pharmacy. It's an amazing book, has a lot of folk medicine, but also research and scientific studies about the specific indoles and beta-glucans, polysaccharides, very technical. That's not really my, the technicalities. Yes, I'm interested in the science, absolutely. Do I research the science? Yes. But regurgitating that information is not so much my specialty. I work more in the shamanic and spiritual realms with the mushrooms, which, this community probably understands that at the root, it's all spiritual, in my humble opinion. So in preparation of the mushroom, I do go and consume, when I find an amanita in the forest, I will drink the little water that's on top of the mushroom, because as the mushroom starts as like an egg, and it expands to like a concave shape, and that's a really good time to harvest it when it's still really bright red and concave. You want it to be kind of tight. And I only work with the caps. There's people that do work with the stems. I just haven't worked with them. I haven't felt called to it. As far as I understand, most of the indoles and alkaloids that I'm looking for are in in a plant, it's called the cambium layer, but in the mushroom it's just like the red pigment part of the mushroom. That's where most of the psychoactive and healing indoles are located. There are cultures that will double boil the mushroom and eat it as food. They'll leach out the indoles and the chemicals to just eat it as food. I know in Japanese culture it's a very desirable mushroom to consume. But so when I drink those little waters, just a little bit, I get a very strong burst of clarity and hunter-gatherer powers. My eyesight gets fine-tuned, and I get very focused, and I feel very connected with the forest and energized. And that's because in the fresh form of the mushroom, there's a lot of ibotenic acid. Ibotenic acid is toxic. So many things that are medicinal are also toxic, but the dose is the medicine. So when it comes to ibotenic acid or fresh amanita mushrooms, you really just want to eat little bits at a time. It's super healing. It's very, very medicinal. It actually helps to weed out neural pathways that are rooted in trauma. So amanita is really good for autoimmune issues where our body is overreactive. It's really good for chronic gut issues. And this is just on a physical level, but there's such a deep spiritual side to it, and we'll go into that in a bit. So the ibotenic acid only should be consumed in low dose. I do prepare a tincture with the fresh mushroom caps every year. It's an old Russian recipe with Stolignaya vodka. I triple infuse the mushrooms into it, and that is a very activating tincture, and it's a very good for the immune system, but like I said, just in small doses with the ibotenic. Now, taking a journey with amanita obviously will require a bit more than just a microdose if you really want to go to that place where your consciousness is shifted. noticeably. And the dosing, if you're familiar with psilocybin, the dosing with Amanita is a bit more elusive, and it's quite a bit different. So when you take a higher dose of Amanita, you would want to have the mushroom be more processed, more decarboxylated. So taking the mushroom caps home, drying them, we have commercial dryers because we dry all kinds of mushrooms. So drying the mushroom caps to a crisp, and for storage, that's what you would do also. You would dry them to cracker dry, not bendy, but cracker dry, and then seal them up in a bag, plastic bag or a jar. Glass is always better. But so that would be like one decarboxylation when it's dried, and in that form, it's relatively safe to take quite a bit. I've taken up to 10 grams of just dried mushroom material, but when I take higher doses than that, I want to utilize the dried mushroom caps, and then I put it into a tea to process it further. So every time the mushroom is processed, it goes from ibotenic, the spectrum goes from a heavier content of ibotenic acid to more muscimol. And the muscimol is the indole and the alkaloids that produce the floating feeling, the flying feeling. And you can take quite a bit of that without hurting yourself. However, for many people that are on these sorts of journeys, there is a purge. And if you are familiar with entheogenic plants and fungi, psychoactive or psychedelic is another word for it. I don't really use that word because to me these are sacraments. They're highly spiritual entities from Mother Nature. So I don't really use the word psychedelic unless I'm talking about something like LSD or ketamine, although LSD is derived from ergot. It's derived from a natural substance. It's been heavily, manipulated and synthesized in a lab. So, and we are part of nature, and I do have great respect for these psychedelics, MDMA, LSD, but it's just not really like what I specialize in. Our ministry, our church, we specialize in entheogens, sacraments that come directly from the land, that hold the wisdom of the earth. So with the muscimol, that's the indole that really helps us connect with our dreams. It can be very mystical, very ancestral in those high doses. A lot of the realizations that personally I've had, which just because I've had a certain realization doesn't mean that another person will, because our journeys with these plants and fungi are deeply personal, and our spiritual journeys are deeply personal as well. But I have felt the wisdom of my ancestors come through to tell me that this mushroom, the Amanita muscaria, has such deep roots with so many cultures. It has been used for so long as a panacea, spiritual medicine for so many things. And just beautiful realizations about, especially like Nordic cultures, that how greatly influenced the music, the art. Took me back a lot to my Scottish roots, and just looking at the Celtic weaving designs, and just knowing in my heart that these people were consuming Amanita, like pre-Christian religions, earth-based religions. And actually in the beginning of Christianity, there are a lot of people and there are a lot of books written about this. It is said that the sacrament was in fact a mushroom. The Canterbury Psalters, I don't know if anyone's heard of these documents, they're in England. They're very hard to get to. Even a copy of them is almost impossible to get to. It's a very hidden part of the origins of Christianity, but there's pictures of mushrooms with Jesus, and stories of healings with these mushrooms for very difficult diseases like leprosy and insanity, and so the roots of the mushroom can be traced even to Christianity. But a lot of the information about utilizing mushrooms as a sacrament has, according to the people who have written these testimonies, that they believe that mushrooms were a big part of early Christianity or Buddhism or Hinduism, like a mana of sorts, like a divine sacrament that came from the heavens to enlighten us, to bring about consciousness, true consciousness and truth, have been very much hidden and disguised through language. So if you're interested in that, we do carry some of those books. I'm kind of new to being like a book vendor, so I'm learning how to work with publishing companies and like trying to find the books that have influenced my path in a way that I can provide them to other people. But we do have quite a few at the shop, and it's fascinating. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, it's absolutely fascinating. There's a lot written about Amanita and psilocybin when it comes to religion. I have spent probably about half of my adult life living in South America and Mexico. I spent a lot of time in Colombia, and in, like I said, Mexico, Oaxaca, the state of Oaxaca, Mexico. And Colombia and Mexico, although psilocybin and Amanita actually grow on every continent, those two countries have some of the most, diversity of mushrooms in the world. And they have deep roots and cultures that can be, found in ancient like ruins and art. There's a lot still there in those two countries, having to do with ancient religions and mushroom sacraments. So in Mexico, the Toltec, the Olmec, the Aztec, they were deeply connected with the mushroom. And one way that they would consume the psilocybin would be to take, about 10 grams, which is a very heroic dose for anyone that's taking them. Even for a large person, that's quite a bit, or someone who has requires larger doses, because the dosing varies from person to person a lot. Dipping them in honey and chewing them up and never actually swallowing the mushrooms, but allowing the mushrooms to seep through the soft palate and directly into the pineal gland. And they would go into ecstatic states, and although a lot of the art from those times and like writings, they weren't really writings, they made pictographs. A lot of it was destroyed. Most of it was destroyed by the colonizers. However, some of the colonizers actually preserved some of the art and brought it because they were so amazed by these mushroom ceremonies and these spiritual states, and who knows, maybe they were consuming the mushrooms too. But one document that did make it back to Spain and was preserved is called the Utatono Codex. I learned about that through a man named Tom Lane. He knows a lot about Mesoamerican mushroom use in shamanic ceremony, and he wrote a book called Sacred Mushroom Rituals. So he enlightened me to the Utatono Codex, and it's a pictograph of the shaman consuming mushrooms and then like going to the underworld and meeting with these deities. Now, all this is just semantics, the way that we say different things. Like the deities could be like the archetypes or like the internal parts, or they could be like truly deities. It just depends on your cultural in ethno-botanical context that you're in. A lot of these ancient cultures are saying the same exact thing, but they're saying it in a way that is culturally adept to where they come from. So the Utatono Codex has been a really important pictograph for me, and I have it not only at the store, but I have it framed in my home, because that's a religious document that shows that this is a sacrament, and 100% for me, this is not recreational. I actually have maybe some controversial feelings about allowing sacred mushrooms to be used recreationally. I think that downplaying the power of these mushrooms. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't microdose and go to work. I mean, I do all the time. I'm not saying that you shouldn't microdose or macrodose and like enjoy yourself. Enjoyment is a wonderful thing, but taking it really to heart that these are really, really powerful, neutral teachers. Like, this is not here to necessarily have a good time. And if you consume it in the hopes to just lightly have a good time, you might be in for a really quite, yeah, Gilbert's laughing, he knows what I'm talking about. As a matter of fact, you wouldn't be surprised, but a lot of people, they'll take an entheogen or psychedelic when they're young, like in high school, and they will be absolutely traumatized by it, never to return until maybe now, and they're adult, yeah, and they're not alone. Someone is clapping, me too, you know. It can be extremely traumatic, and they may not be ready to approach these sort of things until like much later in life, if ever. They might be turned off forever. So the mushrooms have been so healing for me, and that would be like the last thing that I would want for these mushrooms is to be considered like mundane. But, you know, I also believe very much in cognitive freedom. We are our organization, Universal Ministry of Transcendence, is a 508c1a, so it is in fact a church, it's a ministry. And what the 508c1a tax code means is that it's a free church. We're registered with the state of Alaska, but we do not ask for permission to practice our religion. It's deeply personal. We're not a 501c3. We don't have to ask the government or anyone if we can do what we're doing. We just do it. And actually, if you look back into the 501c3 and the 508c1a, you'll see like a certain point in time right in the 80s where the 508c1a was pretty much replaced by the 501c3. So and a lot of mushroom ministries around the country, because they are popping up, utilize the 501c3 tax code, but we just weren't comfortable with that. You know, we're more interested in freedom and not asking for permission to do what we know is right for us, and that is ancient, and that, you know, our bodies and spirits have literally developed with these plants and fungi. We have receptors in our brains. We have the serotonin system to receive the tryptamines. We have an endocannabinoid system that knows how to receive cannabis indoles. So, and then just like cannabis, it will be adulterated. It already has been. There's people that, you know, or they synthesize psilocybin, or they just extract the psilocybin or the psilocin from the mushroom and provide that extra strength, you know, tablet that you can just take. And I've tried it. I've tried it all. Like, if it's psychoactive, I've tried anything I can get my hands on. I want to check it out. It's so interesting to me. I've been doing this since I was like 15, and I'm 40 now. I find that the synthetics and the what's it called? The extracts, they don't have that full spectrum of wisdom that I go to the mushroom to find. And I find that with a lot of these products that are psychoactive, that are like either synthesized completely, like made out of chemicals, or they're extracted and a lot of the other parts of the mushroom have been taken away, or plant. They just don't feel as whole of a teacher to me personally, but they are out there. So let's see. Today we're going to consume Amanita muscaria in ceremony. We're going to consume a low dose, but a little higher than a microdose. Now, when I started to work with Amanita, ingesting it, like I said, I felt the pull of the Amanita through several circumstances that I really felt that mushroom was, you know, pushing me in certain like milestones, like a sacrament in Christianity. By the way, I'm not like denominational. I was raised in, I would say, an agnostic household. We just did not talk about religion or spirituality at all. I was very like materialistic. I mean, actually my grandfather and grandmother were involved in the Episcopalian Church. My grandfather had a degree in theology from Yale, but he went into oceanography. But I know that they were deeply spiritual people, and actually on my Italian side of my family, they were extracted from the Roman Catholic Church because of divorce in the family. So by the time I was born, my family was very far removed from all of that. However, I was super interested in religion, like starting as a preschooler. I was Egyptian. You know, I was telling people I was Egyptian. I wanted to be Jewish. Anyone that I told my mom I want to be Jewish, and she's like, "What?" Like, that's weird. Go ahead. And then like anyone who was like, I grew up in Massachusetts, so we had a lot of like Irish Catholic there. So any of my friends that would go to CCD or Sunday school or I was like, and I wanted to be in there. like my naughtiness, I would go in the church and like light the candles. Like I was just hungry for it. And I was very connected with nature also. Like where I grew up was a very like, I used to make little fairy houses in the woods, and that's what I did. I would be out there making concoctions in the woods. So I've always been like this. Yes, when I first started to consume the Amanita muscaria, I did have trepidation because you hear a lot of stories of people like losing their minds with the Amanita, and usually that's because they went into the forest, they picked one big old mushroom and they ate it, and that is a terrible idea. With any like powerful psychoactive plant or fungi, you don't want to just eat like one. Like if you were harvesting poppies for opium, it's actually very dangerous to just take one poppy, extract the opium, and smoke that. You could kill yourself because mushrooms and plants, they vary in indoles in nature. Like even in the same crop of psilocybin, some of the mushrooms that don't grow to full maturity will be really strong, and some of the bigger ones will be like less strong. So there's a lot of variation. So really the best way to do this is to get a lot of different specimens, mix them together, and then work with that mixture. And it's a lot safer that way because you get kind of like an average of the alkaloids. And that's how we have the tea today. It's just a lot of mushrooms mixed together. So that's a way to like reduce harm reduction, or just to be a little safer, because none of this is safe. Life is not safe. Like we're not even just here, an earthquake could come, nothing is safe. So forget about that. But it was good to approach these things, these mushrooms with respect. They're very old and they're very powerful. So when I first started dosing the Amanita, I was taking literally like a quarter of a gram at a time. Psilocybin dosing, like I said, is different. For me, like a 3-gram journey on penis envy, that's a varietal of psilocybin, one of the stronger ones. I know the name, it must have been a guy, but I've grown vaginas too, like these buns that look, so it's, you know. But a lot of people know about penis envy, a lot of people know about golden teacher. But what I'm trying to say is that the dosing would be around like 3 grams for a very strong journey for me. But with Amanita muscaria, I'll take up to like 17 grams. However, when I first started dosing with the Amanita, that 0.25 of a gram that day, I think we went to like the Vincent van Gogh thing, and it just made me so sad of like how commercialized. It was very powerful, even in these really, really low doses. So with psilocybin, with Amanita, I recommend to everybody pretty much to segue in slowly and find your dose, because what works for one person, what the dose is for one person can be vastly different from another person. You know, there's moments in psilocybin ceremony where a strong-minded person with a big constitution, they can handle a lot more than someone like me. And it's really, dosing is an art form, and it's a process to learn. So I'm gonna take this off. I know it's really cool, but it's pretty warm. The people that are interested in journeying with me and my husband in higher doses, I always want them to start microdosing first. And I want them to microdose with our mushrooms, because I can't comment on something that I've not put my hands on, that I have not grown, that I have not consumed myself. There's only like one thing in the whole apothecary that I haven't tried, and that's wild lettuce tincture, because I just don't feel called to it. But if anyone wants that, I will tell them, like, I've never tried this. The woman who works there with me, she's tried it. Here's what she said: I just don't want to take it. It's a really strong painkiller. I don't need it. I try everything. I try it first. And so if someone wants to work with me in high dose mushroom ceremony, absolutely, you need to microdose with our mushrooms to, build a relationship with our mushrooms, with that strength of mushroom. It's so hard for me to comment on something else. And I do try. I mean, if people have questions about what they have, I'm happy to share information, but it is hard to comment on something that I don't know. I don't know if it even is mushrooms. I don't know how old they are. I don't know how they were stored. I don't know how strong they are. Do you want to try my mushrooms? No, thank you. I'm picky. I know how mine are grown. like the care and the love and the joy that goes into it. And I have seen other specimens, and I just I'm not trying to. I take a lot of pride and a lot of like love and energy into that work, and in the cleanliness and in the product, so or the sacrament. But yes, I cannot cultivate the Amanita muscaria or the chaga. Those are symbiotic mushrooms. So it's like from the end of July to like the middle of September is Amanita season here in this zone. So we do as much foraging as we can in that time, and then after, it's never enough because the Amanita is one of like the top asked for things at the apothecary. So I end up, I have a provider in Russia, Kazakhstan. The forest there is in Russia and Siberia is very similar to here. So that's one reason why I choose to work with them. Another reason is that the quality of what they send me has been amazing. It's not that easy to do business with Russia and Kazakhstan, but I've found my ways. And I am committed to it because I don't want to purchase mushrooms from Europe or anywhere near. There's so much industry there. There's so much history of contamination, like with Chernobyl, and mushrooms they clean up. So I want only mushrooms because they're used in a sacred way, I want them only from the most pristine environments. So that's why I have, chosen to work with them, and I'm very happy with what they send. I have literally nightmares about picking Amanita off the side of the road. So, it can be done. I mean, if you're just, you don't care, it's to each their own, but this is how we do it. I don't know how much more time we have, but I did want to
open up to questions.
Yeah, I wanted
to talk about your opening ceremony and what can people. There was a lot of questions that I know people had about that.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's some questions or experiences that people have had with mushrooms that they want to share.
Yeah, usually people have a lot of questions. So.
Well, you started a sentence and then segued a little bit about purging.
Oh yeah.
I was just wondering if you could.
Talk
about that.
Yeah, purging is a big part of ceremony, I would say. And a purge doesn't have to necessarily be like a physical evacuation. Although for me, it's been like a really big part of my journey, purging, like because I was so heavily indoctrinated into like less savory, mind-altering substances like alcohol and cocaine at a young age. I was very used to like throwing up. But it wasn't until I started studying the ayahuasca in Colombia that I had this realization that like this is the purge. It's not that's not for me. This is the kind of purge I want. I want to purify my system so that I can replace the garbage that's accumulated with something that's more aligned with my soul, with my spirit. And a lot of times with these sacraments, there's a purge, like there's a evacuation of sorts. It could be like just like a release, but we have to, in order to receive the wisdom of the sacrament, we have to make room for it. And if we're full of other stuff, sometimes we have to release that. And I will tell you, like the first time I went on a high dose Amanita journey, at first I was like, why do people do this? This is horrible. And we're not doing that today. We're going to do a low dose. If you throw up, I would be surprised, but you'll probably have some sort of release. But when you're up in the 17 gram range, it doesn't feel good. You're sick. The same with ayahuasca, and the same can even be with psilocybin. Like a lot of times I feel like sick, and there's so that day I remember like, I was just like, why do people want this? This is horrible. And I threw up, and then I was like, oh, then I started to elevate and to really feel that ancestral connection and that wisdom of the mushroom and the wisdom of the earth flowing through me. And so sometimes that's what it takes. And not everybody purges. Some people do a lot. So it's, if you have a fear of purging, there's a way to transmute energy. Like when you're feeling nauseous or feeling sick, you can, work with that energy and kind of like move it into other places, transmute it. People who have like a meditation practice or a spiritual practice are usually more adept at these kind of things, because yeah, it can be a little bit heavy, but you know, so many times in my life, like with these milestones, I have definitely had to give a little bit back to the mother. So, I hope that answered.
Gracefully said.
Yes.
It's funny.
I have a question,
Yes.
Gabi. So in plant medicine work, do you give your intention, when you work with plants, do you give your intention, or does the plant give you the intention? What's the symbiote, you know, how does that work together? Because when you teach plant medicine, do you set an intention, or does the plant just tell you, hey, this is what we're working on today?
That's a really good question, and I would say a little, you know, of both. If you're open to either one or either or, and usually both. A lot of times, the intention can just be like, thank you, mushrooms, like, show me what I need to know. I'm ready, I'm open to what you have to teach me today. And yeah, you can go into it with a certain intention and come out with an even, you know, another understanding. Or like, for example, you know, going in for like spiritual reasons, to balance or to harmonize a relationship, and then realizing, oh, I really need to let go of my habitual smoking. Like, this is holding me back in other ways. Like, so information can come through, and it's not like we're always ready to receive or to act on the message, but it can help to like plant seeds. And then microdosing along the way can fortify the teachings and help us implement the teachings from a larger journey into our daily lives. I've found personally, and I've seen it with other people, but someone might come to let go of like a drug addiction and then end up deciding that they need to make changes in their career. So there's a lot that we can do to set an intention. I know that's a very powerful way to work with these sacraments. But a lot of times I like to leave it up to the mushroom, because I want to know what the mushroom has to tell me. They're so ancient and so magical and so spiritual. That's what I, you know, I'm looking for, the wisdom of the mushroom. So both.
So will you talk about, go further on that wisdom of the mushroom and how it literally is a plant consciousness, is a form of consciousness that goes through the whole earth, you know, at all times, whether it's summer or winter, whether it's harvest or not.
Yeah, that's a powerful teaching of the mushroom, is community and connection, interrelatedness. You know, the root of our existence, like being born onto planet Earth, is all about being connected to everything that is here. We are all one, and a lot of times that's exactly the message that comes through when that's what we need to learn, like that remembering that we are not alone, we are not separate from other. We are, and that ties into like non-judgment, and that ties into an expanded awareness of our tribe, like not just the family we're born into, but our interrelatedness with like all beings. And the mushroom very much like embodies that, and it shows us how it does that in the forest. It's not just all mushrooms. There's trees, there's life, there's death. And a lot of the mushrooms, well, the mushrooms are saprophilic. They thrive on dead matter. So just like the cycles of life, there's so many ways to describe this, and so many different approaches of looking at that, the wisdom of the mushroom. There's so many teachings, so any number of teachings could come through, but I find that like on a base level, that interconnectedness, what you're talking about, the vast stretches and the ability to withstand the endurance of the mushroom. Those are really powerful lessons for us, like when we feel disconnected, when we feel stagnant. You know, those are really powerful messages, and the mushroom embodies that. And gives us strength when we consume it or when we interact with it as a sacrament to persevere and to understand. So, yeah.
I just had a question as to, is there a good way to physically prepare your body in order to sort of have the best reception of all that's going to happen, either before or even after? Meaning, you know, do you take a lot of water? Do you come to this with an empty stomach? Should it be meat-based, fruit, whatever, or, that kind of thing? Or, because I understand today we're doing microdoses, but even with that, we're together for 2 hours. Would we expect, if we did this, that it will carry on throughout the, a portion longer? I know it's all individual, but should we say you gotta map out a couple hours at home just to further absorb however it's moving through your body?
It's a really good question, and it's actually like kind of a couple, it's like one question, but there's like some multiple aspects.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. It's a really good question. So as far as preparing the body to receive the sacrament in micro or macro dose, for the most part, I recommend that people have a relatively empty stomach and they eat light on that day. However, you could absolutely take mushrooms on a full stomach. You just might not get as much out of it as far as the psychic or the spiritual, not the spiritual effect, but just the physical and mental effect, because it's like literally competing with food in your stomach. So a little bit of a fast is good on that day if you can. However, we're all unique and like our needs are different, and so if you're someone that crashes when you don't have like some meat or some fat in your system, or if you're someone who needs like food, then I would say then eat food. There's people that will prepare themselves for mushrooms by fasting for even longer than a day. I'm a very have a fast like vata kind of constituency, so like long fasts with mushrooms is a little bit jarring for me. It's good for me to have a little bit of a base, but I usually won't eat, like I'll give myself like a couple hours to digest before I take the mushrooms, but I will like have something. Now when it comes to ayahuasca, because it is like such a purge, and Amanita sort of middle of the road, but I won't eat on that day because I know that I'm gonna be puking, and it's harder to get those dregs out when you have to puke up food. But we're not going that far today. I wouldn't put that on you guys. We don't have enough bathrooms. We're not ready. So we don't have buckets. I like to puke outside, by the way. Like if I need to purge, I like to be. And so all of this to say, like the donations, we are looking for land. My husband. He is a contractor, so we're looking to build domes and to have our own like piece of property where we can hold ceremony, and I have the vision of how I want it to be as far as like being able to leave the tent, to go outside to the fire when you have like those big emotions, like emotional releases. So there's certain aspects, like I know people do take ayahuasca in a place like this or Amanita, but for me that's very difficult to, I wouldn't be able to maybe do that because I need to be able to get out and like connect with the earth or like release onto the earth. You asked me something else about will you feel it like later? The work we do today, it may affect you for the rest of your existence. Like, you can have just from a microdose, it could change something in you that lasts forever, and you might be piecing it apart for the rest of your time here. But as far as like the acute effects, with Amanita, it does tend to linger, and it's like I said earlier, and this is kind of hard to understand until you consume it, but it's more elusive. It's kind of, there's some people that they'll have very little effect, but the next day they'll be like having like visionary experience. So it is good to, and especially like the more you take, the more important it is to be aware of your set and setting. Like maybe not doing it at home, maybe doing it in ceremony, in a place where it's neutral, where you're not reminded of your like day-to-day life and relationships, because that can interfere with the process as well, like when you're, under the influence of a high dose of sacrament. Yeah, the Amanita is pretty long, like especially in high doses. It's very personal, it's very ancestral. Hopefully that makes sense. If I need to fine tune, let me know. A lot of this is beyond what I can tell you. It's about bioassaying. It's about consuming it and trying it, you know? But there was a question, that someone is sober and has been sober for a long time.
That's right.
And it's okay to not, you can be in ceremony today and not consume, that's fine. I think you can still feel the spirit of the room and the Amanita on board without taking the mushroom. So but also there's a lot of people who are sober from alcohol and harsh narcotics, that they do in fact interact with psilocybin and or Amanita. It's a very difficult thing to become addicted to because it literally just won't work anymore. If you take mushrooms every single day, your tolerance goes way up. Like, you gotta take breaks. And it's neutral, so it's not like, it's intense. Like, taking a high dose mushroom journey, it's intense. It's not something that people, I mean, I'm sure there's someone out there. There have been times in my life where I've taken a lot of mushrooms many days in a row, and I felt that I needed that. My nervous system needed that. It worked for me. It was very isolating. Like, I ended up living in a bus outside and on a piece of land away from people. You know, when you get to those like really like high vibration states, like it is life changing, and a lot of times like your world, the material world takes a while to catch up. So it's not even like cannabis. I've had a hard time personally, or not a hard time, but my relationship with cannabis has been very sticky. I'm currently abstaining from it after another like several month romance. And that, like, people say cannabis is not addictive. For me it is. But the mushrooms, no. It's like I forget to take it, or I do it, or I don't feel like it, or so it has way less of a grip, I would say.
Can you speak briefly on the how the nerve, how it helps with nerves, how it helps the healing of nerves, especially like the stamos stacker, they call it, which brought an elderly person out of an elderly care situation just by giving them that middle ground that you're talking about with the nerves, by just a microdose.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Microdosing is incredible for healing the nervous system, as well as high dose, although it can be a little bit of a shock. So I do always recommend beginning with microdosing. And microdosing can be anything from taking a sub-perceptual dose, like you don't feel it, but you're taking it, you're working with it, to taking enough that you feel it. I like to feel it. I would say like my nervous system really needed help, and the mushrooms have really helped me. I come from a long line of neurotics. It expands neural networks, the psilocybin. It expands neural networks. So as we get older, we kind of start skiing down these neural pathways, and it's a response to trauma, and it's a way to adapt, because as we grow, we take on more responsibility, and there's like more input. We need to make certain things automatic, but some of our automatic responses are totally unhelpful for our growth. So the psilocybin helps us get into like other neural pathways. So that's why it feels childlike, and it feels objective. It's like I can come to the realization that I am not only the source of my own problems, but I am also the answer to them without judging myself.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Don't we all need to know that? I mean, that's where the change, that's the apex of change. The Amanita, like I said, is different in that it helps to weed out the pathways rooted in trauma. So I like to work with both, and sometimes I work with both at the same time. Actually, a lot of times I'll work with both at the same time. But there's something to be said for like learning about Amanita on its own, learning about psilocybin on its own, and then making a combination. The Stamets stack specifically, that is lion's mane, psilocybin, and niacin. In my practice, I don't work with niacin. I know a lot of people who do that stack and get amazing results. For me, it's a bit harsh. Instead of niacin, I work with cordyceps mushroom, which also helps to move energy around the body. I think it's overlooked as a neural mushroom, like a brain function mushroom. It helps to repair tissue, it repairs the adrenals after prolonged stress. Lion's mane helps to repair the myelin sheathing of the nervous system, so like if your dog chewed up your cord, you know, it's not as conductive, that helps to like repair the sheathing and also to just repair the gut-brain axis. And so utilizing the mushrooms, actually even in ceremony when we do high doses, a lot of time I'll put lion's mane and cordyceps in with the brew, because I want to help ingrain those neurogenesis. It's neurogenerative, it's very healing for the nervous system, so I want to make a good impact, a lasting effect through utilizing the other mushrooms in combination. And I believe that when you mix small amounts of lion's mane and cordyceps with psilocybin, the symbiotic effect is like greater than the sum of its parts. So you can take smaller amounts.
So maybe one more question, please, and then we just.
So I cook with lion's mane
Mhm.
for the brain thing.
Mhm.
So how do you think it's best ingested? The way you do it, or just the cooking where I'm just eating the actual? I just put it on right before my dish is done. Just break it up, just saute it a little bit, so it's not that texture, you know.
Yeah.
It's really good, and I've noticed a lot more clarity.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, like how do we prepare these things? And there's a lot of different ways to prepare them or to ingest the mushrooms. With lion's mane, I have also found personally that eating the fresh mushroom cooked is the best way for me to take it. It helps my gut a lot in that way, like I've noted, like just for digestion it's amazing, and for just cognitive function, but not everyone can get access to like fresh mushrooms all the time, although there's more and more people here that grow lion's mane. I do not, I only grow psilocybin, and I'm busy enough with that. But the another way to take it is like dried in a capsule, or dried in a smoothie. I would say that would be like the second closest thing to the fresh mushroom, like actually eating the mushroom. And you have to be careful because a lot of these products on the market with the medicinal mushrooms, they're made with mycelium, and the mycelium is grown on a substrate like brown rice. So it actually ends up being more of a placebo effect when you're taking it than actual like mushroom beta-glucans and polysaccharides, because there's very little mushroom in the product. It's mostly brown rice. Take a look, even in the most known ones, I'm not going to name names, just look on the back of your stuff, and if you get disillusioned, come to my shop. It's organic, whole fruit, 100% fruit body lion's mane. Now there's also something to be said for making an extract, which could be like a tea, or it could be a tincture with an alcohol extraction and a hot water extraction. Alcohol extractions are going to pull out more of the antiviral properties.
So you would recommend the alcohol extraction with like an oyster mushroom? Because
If you're using it for virus, yes, and or for the immune system, yes. But lion's mane and oyster mushrooms are soft mushrooms, so you can get a lot out of them just by eating them. Whereas something like chaga or reishi is like rock; it's like a wood. It needs to be extracted. So a lot of these supplements where it's like chaga in a capsule, it's not really it's not the most bioavailable form. You need to make a tea. And the tea with chaga, for example, will pull out more of the anti-cancer, anti-tumor properties, and the tincture will work more on the antiviral properties. So yeah, there's a lot to know about preparation. It's an important part of it. But I also say, like, if you absolutely dislike taking capsules, like, don't take the capsules. Do the tincture. You know, getting it in is better than worrying about how you did it. Yeah. And that's hard for me too. The psychoactive with the sacrament, they're all sacraments to me, but with the ones that affect my psyche and spirit in a way that it alters my consciousness, I am dedicated to taking those, but sometimes it's hard to take the medicinal ones. So
the mushrooms affect all different levels of our being, all of our planes of existence, if you will, like the big emotional, mental, physical, astral, causal, all of that. Does it affect all of us?
Yes.
Yes.
I believe so, yeah. Well, you tell me, are you going to stay for the ceremony?
I don't know. I was one of those bad people that didn't read the email, so I wasn't prepared to.
Right on.
So let's go ahead and let's give Gabi first off a big